Hi there, business owner. Do you want a better understanding of business finance, what your numbers actually mean, and stories of the highs and lows of business, where I'll be sharing my tips and tricks every week? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stephanie. How are you? I hope you've had a wonderful week. If you're new here, welcome. There is a back catalogue of more than 30 episodes now. We do a weekly podcast every Thursday at 6 a.m, 15 minutes or less, talking about a different area of business or an interview with a fellow entrepreneur, enabling us all to learn from each other and build a better business. This week, I wanted to talk to you about Christmas parties or parties in general. This time of year, most employers have their Christmas party if they haven't had them already. Some choose to do it in the summer and have a summer barbecue instead. And I'm going to talk about the rules and the legalities of having these events for both you as an employer and your employees, because I want you to have your annual event, your Christmas get-together, summer get-together in the most tax-efficient way possible. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I'd love to know what you think. Let me know. On with the episode. And that brings us to the end of another week of the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening to it, so that I can reach more business owners and help them build better businesses. See you next week for the next episode. So Christmas parties or annual events have been around in businesses for many years. They are supposed to be a function or a get-together that is social, that enables you to build rapport with your employees, to increase staff morale, to celebrate the achievements in the business within the year. But did you know that depending on how your business is paying for it and the costs involved and certain parameters, your employees may actually have to be taxed and pay national insurance on the value of that benefit of being able to attend that function. I'm going to go through the rules in more detail, but it's definitely something to be aware of, because the last thing you want is for it to have the opposite effect and for your employees to be taxed or charged for having a Christmas party or an annual get-together. When putting on a social event or a Christmas party, in order to work out what your reporting obligations and any national insurance contributions that become payable, you need to make a note of the following things. You need to ensure that it's an annual event, whether it's open to all of your employees or not, how much the actual costs are per head, how many events you are providing during the tax year, and whether the employee involved is a director and how much they earn. Now, as with all HMRC rules and guidance, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and every business is unique, so the rules and the guidance needs to be applied to your specific business and your specific situation. So take from this episode what fits your business and obviously disregard things that don't match, because certain businesses have different locations, certain businesses have like a director's lunch and then have one for everybody else. Some have multiple events throughout the year. So it's really important to look at your specific situation and apply the guidance according to your situation. So you do not have to report anything to the HMRC or pay any tax or national insurance as long as these three things apply. And that is that the party or similar social function must be open to all of your employees. So it cannot be directors only, it cannot be a subset of employees. It needs to be an invitation to all employees that they can attend. It also needs to be annual. So the most popular ones are the Christmas party or the summer barbecue. Your business may have an end of year. It may have an end of tax year celebration. If it's annual, then it counts and it does not need to be reported. And also the cost must be less than £150 per person that's attending the event. It's also worth noting that if you are doing online or virtual parties, these also count, and those three criteria must be adhered to in order for them to be exempt and not be reported to the HMRC for tax or national insurance contributions. It's also important to note that If you are putting on multiple annual events, and if you combine the per head total and it's under that £150, they're still exempt and do not need to be reported. So it may be that you spend £75 per head on the Christmas party and £75 per head on the summer barbecue, and that's what works for you and your business. Again, as long as all those criteria applies, you won't need to report that to HMRC. They are exempt from tax and national insurance contributions becoming payable. It's also worth noting that if you have separate locations or departments in your business, then an annual event that's open to all of your staff based at one location still counts as exempt. But you can also put on separate parties for different departments as long as all of your employees can attend at least one of them. So if you are having a director-only Christmas meal, for example, then you could also have another party for your employees, and as long as those directors are not invited, then you can keep them as exempt too, as long as it falls under those three criteria. So what do you do if those three criteria do not apply? Well, what you need to do if your events are not exempt is you will need to report the costs to the HMRC and pay national insurance on them. So you will also need to report on each employee's P11D form, which is done on their payroll at the end of every year, which details any benefits they've received throughout the tax year, and also pay Class 1A national insurance contributions on the full cost of the event. If you are having multiple events that cost more than £150 per head combined, you can make the decision to choose which one you report. So if one event costs less than £150 per head, you may be able to count that one as exempt, but then the rest of the events or other events that are over that threshold would be reported, and the Class 1A national insurance contribution becomes payable and it needs to be reported on the employee's P11D form. If you have two or more events that cost less than £150 per head individually, and you cannot use the exemption because you've already used it on another event, then you will have to report and pay on the full cost of any additional events that go over the limit. My top tip, I haven't done one of those in a while, my top tip of the week is to get a record, whether it's a spreadsheet or we create separate nominals in Xero specifically for the parties so that we can run reports off nice and easily with the full cost on there, is to monitor the costs throughout the tax year if you are going to have more than one. Also to monitor all the costs involved. So it could be that you've got a room hire, for example, and maybe you're paying for the DJ or a photo booth hire. Those costs would be split across the employees that are attending or the employees that are invited to the per head amount. And that also needs to be kept a record of. You don't want any surprises, and you don't want to be surprising your staff when you go, oh, by the way, you've now got to pay extra national insurance on the fact that we gave you a Christmas party. So do track it through the year. If you have a bookkeeper, they should be able to do that for you. If you do your own bookkeeping and don't know how to set up the extra nominals in Xero, drop me a message at ABCS UK. I'm more than happy to help get that all set up for you. But it is something that you need to be aware of and track throughout the year so that there's not a surprise at the end of every tax year or financial year for corporation tax purposes as a business owner. I really hope that helps and it gives you a much better understanding of the HMRC guidance and the legalities and reporting obligations around Christmas parties and social functions in general. If you've already had your Christmas party in 2022 for your staff, now is the perfect time to go back, double check your costs and either put them onto a spreadsheet or create that extra nominal in your accounting software and move those purchases and costs across into that nominal so that you can clearly see and run a report off to see how much your costs were. You can then work it out per head and ensure that those exempt criteria are met. And if they're not met, then you need to be obviously keeping a note of those because they will need to be reported to the HMRC on the P11D form and the Class 1A national insurance. That will become payable on the cost too. As I said earlier, if you need any help with that or need any further information or just have a question, do get in touch with us at ABCS UK. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or you can email info@abcsuk.com. We're more than happy to help. I want us all to build better businesses, and I'll see you next week. And that brings us to the end of another week of the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening to it, so that I can reach more business owners and help them build better businesses. See you next week for the next episode.